Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another Someone Big podcast. My name is Tom Schweitzer, and I am really happy to have you here with me today. This podcast is dedicated to sharing the message and the mission and the story of people that I have come in contact with, encountered in my life that changed me, transformed me, or became somebody in my life that I admire. And I am really excited for you to meet that person today. She is someone big in my life. She is someone big in her family's life. And we had an adventure together that I think that she and I can say we are the only two people that created such a project. Her name is Anne Charlotte Robinson. And we met 25 years ago. And she acted and sang her whole life like myself. And that's where we really first connected. We had no idea that 20 years later, we would be creating a rock opera about her son who took his life. So today you're going to be hearing this story about A Will to Survive, the rock opera, which was created to spread the message that it's never too late. So sit back and relax, or if you're listening to this and walking around, keep walking. I'm really excited for you to meet my friend, Anne Charlotte Robinson. Hi, Anne Charlotte.
Hi.
Nice to have you here today. Thank you. This is only my third podcast, so I'm just...
Well, it's my first.
Okay,
so
great.
I'll do my best.
I'm just getting used to it too. So,
yeah.
And I couldn't be more comfortable with somebody, sitting with somebody who I know very well. And you know, I love you, and you have been a big part of my growth over the last 25 years as a person. And so I thought today would be really interesting to talk about what we created, to talk about A Will to Survive, the rock opera. But before we got there, maybe just to say how we got there. And that would be years of friendship, years of knowing each other. And then I got to know your family, and I got to know Martin, your husband, your one son, Nicky, and then of course, William.
Yeah.
So we lost William now. It's
5 years.
5 years.
It's been 5 years.
I was going to say 4
January
years.
14th. Yep.
And 5 years later, I think we just talked about this on the phone just yesterday. We're not going to go back. We're going to tell the viewers how they can watch the story about William and how they can see the documentary we created. But if you could talk to our viewers about, it's 5 years later now, what do you think?
Well, it's been quite a journey, and unfortunately, I've had the opportunity to meet a number of other parents like myself who have had a similar experience, and so one of the takeaways for me is that this is not going away. It is not these issues that were underlying my son's suicide, they're not going away. They are in fact intensified by the pandemic and by everything that we're currently going through. Right. And so I appreciate the opportunity to sit down and talk to you about this today, because I think it's really a very, very critical time.
Yeah, I think the concern has always been there for young people in suicide, but because of what we all have gone through in the last year, we know that it's rising. We know that anxiety, depression, and loss of motivation is at its peak.
Yeah.
So, it's 5 years later now, but when you go back and you go back to that time, not just that day, but go back to that time, what things come up for you?
Gosh, it was such an just surreal kind of experience. To this day, I expect him to walk in the door. It is just, it's impossible to remove him from who I am. and from who we are. And it's a very, very painful process, but it does get better, and it does pass in terms of the acute feelings that you have. It does sort of settle into, or it has, in my case anyway, it has settled into a place in my heart where I know I can reach him, I know I can talk to him, I know I can think about him without it being too painful. I was telling a friend of mine today that no matter what all these years of thinking about it and talking to professionals and going through and hearing from his friends and everything else, no matter what all the rationalizations are, there's no way that I as a parent can ever escape the fact that I failed my son. You know, I failed him. It may not make sense, it may not be logically true, but I will always feel that way.
And in what way do you feel you failed him?
Well, that's important, because as I was going through the process with him before this happened, he was struggling, and we had taken him to therapy. He was in therapy. He had been in the hospital. He was undergoing medication treatment. He was
so everything because William dealt with everything from which he called life, anxiety, depression, feeling like he didn't fit in,
right.
That the world was not going along with his heart and his mind, that he couldn't make it work. He couldn't live a congruent life. Is that right?
Well, I think that was part of it, but I do think that his feelings were so extreme that it really comes back to his bipolar disorder diagnosis.
Right, so mental health.
He was also ADHD, and so he had a certain amount of chaos in his mind anyway.
At all times.
And then even as a child, and then as he grew older, and the normal teenage insecurities, self-image issues, all of these things came along, and then he also was particularly incensed at the way people tended to behave towards each other, and he was somebody that reacted very strongly to bullies, and he would have a very
injustice.
Yes, injustice was a big deal for him, and he was searching for himself and who he was authentically, and then the ADHD, and then you know, really as he got to that age, which I know we know now that bipolar disorder has, you know, it sort of starts
once it has its grip.
It starts to peak when
you're
they get
in
in
the
a
teenage
certain age.
years.
Yeah, and so things got more and more chaotic and harder for him to sort out how to cope with things. And we did all the things, the normal things that I think that one would do. And we're a very stable family. We have a loving home. We have resources that he could use. So, you know, this kind of thing can happen to anybody. And
anybody.
That is really an important point to make.
It is, and I think because in our community, we knew who you were, we knew who your children were, and I think it's almost, you know, in a very different way. I don't think anybody in our community really worried about COVID until I had COVID.
Yeah, right.
And I think that people and parents in our community years ago would hear about so-and-so taking their life, and until it was in their backyard. And I think William really, because he was so loved and he was so charismatic and people knew who you all were, William unfortunately made this very real.
I think that's true. And it just, you know, he had such he was a center of gravity for so many of his friends, and the church was completely overflowing with this amazing selection of people from every different type, you know, of kid was in his mix.
It was quite an array.
And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that, you don't, as a parent, I knew that things were going on and we were trying to deal with what we understood. But somewhere deep inside of myself, I thought, well, this isn't going to happen. This can't, people were saying, well, there's some suicide risk, there's this, there's that, there's the other. I thought, yeah, okay, but no, not my kid. Not my kid. That's not going to happen to us. And because we love him so much,
yep.
and because we're doing
attention.
everything that we can.
He's going to the doctor,
right,
he has a
right,
therapist, he's on medication,
right.
What more can you do?
But I do have to say that there was still a part of me, and I think this is part of what, going back to the blame issue, this is part of what really, really hurts me now about what we did was at the same time, I was being a regular mom. My older son, I was doing the same thing with my younger son. Where's your schoolwork? What's going on with school? Have you finished these assignments? What are you doing with this? What are you doing with that?
Worried about the logistics of just getting through a day.
The logistics of life, and also keeping in mind he was a junior in high school at the time. And okay, college is coming. This is all happening. It's all coming up soon. And so at the same time as that I was sort of dealing with all of this, I was also pushing him in his schooling in a way that, had I only understood a little bit better about what was going on.
What is that? If you only understood what? Because we know many people that might be sitting there listening to this and they're doing the same thing, especially during this pandemic. So what would you have wished you would have seen differently and done differently?
If I had known what I know now, I would have found a program in the wilderness. I would have found a school, whatever. I would have taken him out of the setting in which he was in, removed the whole need for school or whatever that is for that moment, because the most important thing at that time was how he was feeling and dealing internally. And I certainly would have demanded a lot more information from the doctors, who were not very helpful and did not let us know really the severity of his situation and how critically close he was to this result.
Wow.
And that really is disappointing. But so I would have, yanked him out of there, taken him to something, let's go do something.
Because no test,
right.
No school, no college, what you're going to do with your life, none of that matters when you don't have your life.
That's right. And one of the ways that I learned this lesson with my older son, because after this happened, Nicky came home and was home for 2 years. And we just sort of let him follow his nose. He was going to do what he felt like doing, and
so no pressure.
Taking
the pressure off.
All the pressure off of him, and just said, let's just be a family. Let's just kind of grieve this thing through together. Let's figure out what to do. And in the meantime, there were issues going on with his grandparent, his grandmother, and then another grandmother. And so he was involved with the family, with us, with the three of us were involved with trying to, help with family matters and do things. But we were doing things together and not sort of saying, you have to go do this thing. This is your, this is what's
what we
prescribed.
expect out of
this
life.
is what's prescribed by high school and college and this and that and the other. We just sort of let all of that go. Right. And now, 5 years later, he's 25 years old, and he has evolved and developed into a very solid guy. And he now has his feet firmly on the ground. And so I look back on, and now he's back in school. So now he's back to pursuing a biology degree and doing very well and really much in charge of himself.
Right.
And so I look at that situation and I think, oh boy, that is such an important learning lesson.
And that could be also because you and Martin gave him some space to just allow him to explore what was out there. Something that and I've told you this many times, that I admire so greatly is being somebody in my life that has dealt with grief early on, and I've worked with a lot of people with grief as the main therapeutic, relationship, right? what I think many of us admire about you, and we still stand in awe, and I don't even know if you know really what happened, that you could have taken your pain and your grief and all of this that you're talking about, although you wish you would have done this differently or saw something or sent him here, or maybe I didn't say the right thing. You took all of that right after his funeral when I came to you and I said, I have an idea. And you did something where I introduced you in the beginning. I think we could be the only world record holder for creating a rock opera with, about suicide, for suicide prevention, starring the mother of the main character.
Well, it's highly unlikely, that's for sure.
I think we won that award.
Yeah.
So we created the rock opera with our center, A Place to Be. We created A Will to Survive. And you stood up there doing your craft that you've done, your whole life, singing and acting, but never knowing that you were one day going to play a role that was really you. And I think throughout all those years that we toured that show, I heard time and time again people coming to me after saying, we don't know how she does it. We don't know how she did it. And hundreds and thousands of students that watched the production would want to hug you after because they felt like they were your child in that moment. Two things. What happened the moment that you decided, you heard the idea, when I came to you, like, hey, let's do a rock opera, and you can pour out your heart and your tears on stage for thousands of people. What was the moment that you decided that you were going to do that? That's your first question. And then second, what did it feel like, the actual show itself?
Well, it dawned, you remember it as a one instant thing, but it actually was, yes, you did come and you said, I have this idea, and I'm going to come back to you with this idea. And I know you well enough to know that it had to be something in performance. It was just something that was going to be...
I have a great idea.
Right.
Let's build a model plane together.
Let's put on a show.
Yeah.
And then you came back with a much more fully formed idea and presented it to both Martin and I. And of course, one of my main concerns, because that's a natural outlet for me. And also because of our relationship, our long relationship, and what I know and have watched and have seen you do with so many people, with so many different challenges, and young people and old people, all kinds of things, I really just trust you. So I knew that if you had this idea and it was fully fleshed out and I was going to put myself in your hands for it, I really trusted that was all that you had the perspective to see that it was going to have a purpose, not just for me to get on stage and be the lead in a show. That had absolutely nothing to do with.
I knew when I came to you that I would have never have done anything in my life so delicate.
Right.
Because you are the parents of this young man, and the reason being, I was hearing of suicide happening all over the place in our area. Especially, there was the run of suicides right after Williams.
Yep, that's right.
And I feel like I can't even, to this day, can't thank you enough for entrusting. When you handed me one of his journals, I remember you leaving the house, and I held it there in tears. Because I couldn't believe I had that opportunity to be inside of this child's heart.
Yeah. Well, but the main thing with that was that I had to make sure that my husband was okay, that Martin was okay with that, because it was a very delicate. He and I are very different. So for me, it works really well for me to have an outlet. Because I'm
Send out the message.
I am an extrovert, and so that kind of therapeutic process works really well for me. But not him. He is very reserved, very private, And so that was really, really important for me that
And one of
he
my-
was okay.
One of my
with
favorite
that.
things about Martin, knowing that it took him a whole 2 years before he saw the show,
Mm-hmm.
that when I explained what the set design would be, that it, scaffolding and basically a rooftop where his son would have spent time, that is the one place Martin felt that he could contribute,
Yeah.
and he would be there then with us
Yeah.
in the show.
Yeah, so he
Unbelievable.
built that and that's very, very like Martin. So he would be working behind the scenes to enhance or help or support in some way, and that was the perfect opportunity for him to do that. As far as the way it felt, I have to say that this was, thank you for your kind words, but for me, I was the beneficiary of so much from these, especially from you, from Kim, from these wonderful, wonderful young people that we were working with, these talented, kind, open-hearted young people, all of them going through their own various things, and they were so good and supportive, and I really was in a cocoon in one way. I was very protected and safe and loved and throughout that whole process. So there was nothing scary about any of that to me.
I don't know what I'll ever experience like that again, because the rawness of it, because some of his friends were in the actual production.
Yeah.
So when we would be at rehearsal, they would be crying. They would be crying. You would hold it in so you could hug them. And, between the music that, I want to give Cedric DeMapolis a nod here too.
Absolutely.
And Cedric's amazing writing of
Yep.
the music along with me. But when we were in rehearsal and we were writing the music, and a lot of it was organic. We were coming up with the show as we were rehearsing.
Absolutely.
That you would walk in there, and so many of these young people, ages 14 to 20, could not wait to hug you. Doesn't even sound like a good word nowadays, hug.
I know.
Hug. Listen to that. That's how people bond.
know.
That's how people love.
I know.
This is why we need our hugs
I
back.
know.
But just visualizing that. And I could tell how much you loved the environment that we were setting.
And it was emotional nourishment. It really was, where I was feeling so in the desert and so lost, and here comes all this wonderful love flowing in from these people. So yes, it was such a terrible tragedy. And I would take it. I would reverse everything in a minute. If I had the opportunity, I would be back there and have my son with me, and I would go back in a second. But I can't. And out of it came, the positive thing is that out of it came this wonderful understanding of I think there's an amazing ability to love and empathize in this current generation. I think they are.
And now they're being tested. They're being tested deeper than any other generation that we can remember right now.
Absolutely, and which is really hard for a generation as sensitive as this one is. And I say that not just because of my own children, but because through this process with our casts, through many friends of Williams who I still stay in touch with, they feel this world in a way that I think
we didn't have
I don't remember internalizing things the way that they do. And so so going back again to being a parent, when you see this generation going through this, you just have to take it extra you have to take it extra
Carefully.
seriously, because there is a lot under the surface, and a lot of
and there's so much confusion.
Yes.
If you start to talk about medicating depression and therapists, and it's hard to find the right psychiatrist, and
It's very hard.
we don't even have enough places around here that somebody with mental health issues who is a teenager, we don't have a lot of offerings around here.
No.
And then the overabundance of hearing the word anxiety, depression. I have bipolar.
Well, and now there's
medicating.
Not self-medicating,
self-diagnosing.
self-diagnosing. So now, I've got bipolar, I'm anxiety.
And
this,
people
that, and the
really
other.
do, like William really did.
And they Google it and they say, well, here are the symptoms and here's what it is, and then all of a sudden it becomes a sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
Even if there's not an issue going on that's that deep. I mean, like you always say, that you can be sad. We can all be sad in life, but that's a different thing.
And we can have nervous feelings, even often,
and
that doesn't mean you have an anxiety disorder.
That's right. So,
and then there are people like like many people I work with, and somebody like William, who actually had it.
Yeah.
And that's why when you're talking about the highs and the lows, it's one thing to be a very confused young man. It's another thing that he couldn't control his brain.
Right.
And we know more now than ever that it all goes back to the brain.
Right.
Conditioning and chemical as well.
It is a chemical thing completely. With him at the end, it was all about the chemistry in his brain, because he would know when he was in one of his highs, he would know that he was headed for a steep fall into a black hole. And just knowing that and not knowing how to stop it or how to control it, and he was completely trapped within his own brain chemistry. And so these things, and I blame our society in many ways, because we have not paid attention to mental health. We have not paid attention to people who struggle in all kinds, in a myriad of different ways. And
we're always looking at what to blame.
Yeah.
And I think something that the pandemic unfortunately has brought up is everybody's mental health. I had a friend of mine who has some very severe chemical mental illness, deep depression. And so maybe on the 4th or 5th week of the pandemic, I asked her how she was doing. We were taking a walk. And she said, "It's interesting. I'm doing the same, but it's interesting." She said it was interesting to her that she was watching everybody else around her start to feel a little bit like her. I think between that and also working with people with autism, that many of the young people I've worked with, it depends on where you are on the autistic spectrum. It's not everybody, but most of who I have worked with, they sort of live in a surreal sort of world that doesn't make sense. And I think we all in the last 12 months have really felt, and not just the pandemic, but the atmosphere of America and in general, that we kind of know what that feels like. So it goes back to what we said in the beginning, until it happens to you, you don't think it's going to happen to you.
That's right.
So we took this show, started about 25 kids, rock band, scaffolding, went into all these schools. Thousands of audience members, thousands of students saw this. After each one, we would have a question and answer period.
Right.
And I think we have said this before, one of the most amazing parts of doing this tour of the show was that you got to connect with the children, with the students in the high school. Is there a moment that sticks out to you? Any one time?
It was really interesting to me, because the people, there wasn't any one particular time. I do remember one young woman who came and she gave me a bracelet, and she told me that she had gotten that bracelet from a friend when she had been feeling really bad, and she gave me this bracelet, and I said, "Oh my God, you need to keep this. This is for you." And she was so determined to give me that bracelet. There was something about the giving of that was so important to her. But I mean, it wasn't just about suicide. It was about my grandmother died, and I'm in terrible
The show
grief.
unearthed
I'm,
grief.
I don't know what to do.
Or I relate
about-
to being different.
or-
I remember
yeah.
many kids coming up, it's almost when you would see an audience, you could see where you could see what we have seen for years, populations of, here are the really cool kids, and here's
Yeah.
maybe the kids on the fringe.
Yeah.
Now we would have most of those kids that were like me on the fringe, they'd run right up to us and hug us.
That's right.
And then
And stand in line and wait to have
get a hug.
to have a moment or get a hug, and that was to me so incredibly touching. I mean, it was so.
And you have
moving.
your Will bracelet on now, right?
I do have my Will bracelet on.
So that was for Will himself
It was.
and then we had a red one
Yep.
that said a will
For
to survive.
Yep.
And my favorite bracelet story is I was working in a psychiatric unit,
Right.
and it was probably 2 or 3 months after we started a tour. And there was a young lady who was probably around 17, 18 years. Oh, she had to be 18 to be there. She was 18, and she was just staring out the window, very despondent. And I was in there as a music therapist. Everybody else was singing, we were talking. But as she leaned like this against the window, I saw a Will to Survive bracelet.
Yeah.
And because of the proper thing to do, I couldn't, I did not want to reveal that, hey, I know that show. So I went over to her and I said, I really like your bracelet. And she would have had no idea who I was. And she said, yeah, it helped me get here.
Oh.
And she said, it helped me get here. And this is the funny part. There was this annoying song in the show called Reach Out that stuck out to me. And she would have had no idea she was talking to the person,
Who wrote those songs?
Who wrote the song. She was, it was an annoying song and apparently before she saw the show 2 days before she tried to take her life.
Oh.
And I did finally get to say, I know that show, and I'm one of the horrible songwriters that wrote that
annoying
but
song.
I'm glad the song did something. So I think
That's
that,
great.
I mean, I know we've sat at dinner and lunch and just as friends, and I think we both kind of stand back in awe of not only the gift that William gave the world and gave us, and then in fact that's why we had to create, the show toured for a while, and we were very amazing performance at the Kennedy Center.
Right.
In front of our renowned opera singer friend,
That was-
Renee Fleming, and
that was amazing.
her support, that we made a documentary because somehow we wanted this story. I really wanted the story of how somebody can take grief and pain, one that I can't imagine, and that's if they want to hear the whole story, we're going to send them to Just Like Will.
Right.
Thanks to A Place to Be and Hilltopper Productions, we got to do, and Steve Narangis, let's give him a shout out.
Absolutely.
For creating a beautiful documentary short that has gone to many festivals, thanks to Steve. But we really wanted to tell the story of what you can do with pain and what you can do with when you don't know what else to do. And I think right now is in the world, we're sort of in that same place.
Well, and one sort of through thread to this for me really is that human beings, we need community. We need other people.
So badly.
And so what I gained from being involved in the show, really for me personally, was being in this community of people that understood the things that I was grappling with and the things that I understood what they were grappling with, and we were able to sort of be together and work through this time together. And I think that so many people are so afraid, there's so much stigma still, and I'm struggling, I'm having a hard time, and then taking the next step to go
To really reach out.
to reach out and find a group that you can talk to. And now it makes it even more difficult. Now it makes it even more difficult with the pandemic. But there is so many resources that are out there now. And to me, the lesson of all of this to me is that we help each other out. We help each other through things. Life is hard. It is complex. Terrible things happen to people all the time. And we get through it together. We get through it by that one person that reaches out and says, I'm here for you.
And study upon study, those who have been saved, those who wanted to take their life and have been saved, it is known that if only one person
Absolutely.
is there, one person believes in you, or that could be a group. And I think what we went through was we built a community.
We did, that's right.
And it also felt like belonging.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is also, it's really hard to feel like you belong on Zoom.
Yeah.
Nothing against Zoom. Zoom is great. Thank God
Thank
for Zoom.
God for Zoom.
Thank God for Zoom. But it's really
Exactly.
hard to feel like you connect.
Yeah, I know.
And people with mental illness like William, who, if you saw William, right, and I knew him, charismatic, looked like he connected to every single person there was, had girlfriends coming out of his ears, who wouldn't want to spend some time with him, right? What people don't really know about true depression and true mental illness or bipolar, there's a list.
Yep.
There's a disconnect, even when it looks like somebody can connect.
That's right.
And so what we did, I think, is give some hope that when you are that dark and you feel that disconnected, that is never, one, too late to reach out, like the girl said.
Yeah.
Two, that you're just like everybody else.
And that this darkness that is in your mind is actually something that can be addressed, but you can't do it yourself.
Right.
And that was one of the things that William he was just determined that he was a man and he was gonna sort this out himself. He said it to me 1,000 times. And it's not possible. It's not possible. You can't splint your own broken leg. You can't do
Right.
your own heart surgery. You can't do these things by yourself, and that I think is so important for independent young people who feel like they want to take their life in their hands, but you have to accept the fact that there is something that is not your fault, that has nothing to do with the value of you as a human being, that has nothing to do with your character, that is going wrong in your mind, and you cannot solve it by yourself. Right. And I think probably had William had a little bit more of that understanding earlier, not when things got really critical, because he was reaching out at that time,
yeah.
But it had gone all the way into full-blown, bipolar, huge swings. We started seeing evidence of this back in middle school.
Right.
And
this is where your message in the beginning of this.
Yeah.
Listen.
Pay attention.
It really comes down to paying attention and listening. And I think one benefit of the pandemic is it leveled the playing ground for everybody. Like right now, complaining about school, you're just lucky to get your kid out of bed to go onto Zoom.
Yeah.
A lot of America, they don't have jobs. Like we're all right now trying to just get along. And I think I hope that the pandemic not only has awakened a deeper part of gratefulness, but also that part that you're talking about, that your family, the people you love, the people that are struggling right around you, really stop and listen to them.
Yeah. I think it's so super important. And, it's the only thing that I could, we couldn't have loved him anymore. We couldn't have done any more for him.
Let me ask you this.
But I could have been more attentive. Both his father and I work, and I was busy with my life, and I was doing this and doing that, and had I heard him a little more when he was 12 and 13, I feel like we might have been able to head it off at the pass a little. And we know now very young kids are taking their lives, amazingly young kids, shockingly young people. Right. And so it is not something that you just, those teenagers. No, you have to start much, much earlier to be aware and attentive to these things. And if your child is being bullied, or anything along those lines, move them. Get out of that situation. Change it. Take action. Don't think, everybody goes through that.
And something that you brought up that I think when I have been working for years with parents, the word judgment keeps coming up too. You can judge your child by one look, rolling of the eyes. I'm actually working with somebody right now who's a young adult trying to tell her parents the pain that she's in, and they have very strict ways they think of life, and they're not going to accept that. And this girl I have been watching declining in her motivation to just make a day happen, on top of the pandemic, that those parents can't step back and really go, wow, we're all just trying to get through a day, and our daughter here has tried to come to us now 10 times trying to say something. I think it is a great time in the world right now to stop and maybe look at yourself as parents, look what you might not be hearing, and see where you're judgmental. It's something I not being a parent myself, but working with tons of children, even as a therapist, we can be judgmental. Or what you should do. What should you do next?
Yeah, we have these thoughts in our mind and about what life should be and what we should do and how we should go about things. And when it comes to raising children, I think the one thing that's really clear to me now is that they are their own people, and my prescribed way of looking at the world is just mine. It only belongs to me because I've managed to find my way into this particular perspective. Mm-hmm. That has nothing to do with what this other young person is going through and their development, and I only see a part of it.
Right.
Even if I'm a parent and I'm watching, I'm only seeing a part of all of the internal stuff that's going on inside, and the impressions that they're making of the world, and the way that they're seeing things, and the way that they're developing and reacting things in little micro reactions all the time.
Yep.
Right? And so to sit down and impose your thought, just like my parents who are very old world European, boy, there was a very prescribed way that you were supposed to do things, which I broke out of as soon as I possibly could and managed to find my own way. Right. With lots of mistakes. And luckily, they were wise enough to say, well, she's got to make her mistakes.
Yep.
And I did, and I had to learn my own way.
And you have to have patience.
Yes.
With children that are trying to find their way.
You do, and you have to let them have their, obviously you've got to keep them safe. I understand. I mean, I'm right there. But you also have to, there's these fine judgments you can make that can allow them to have their ability to be their own voice and to be their own person. And if you deny that, then you bottle it up. You bottle them up.
Let me ask you this. Aunt Charlotte. Do you feel Will with you now?
Yes, all the time.
And how is that?
All the time.
Where do you feel him? Where do you see him?
It isn't really aware. It's more, he's just always there. He's just always in my heart, and in my heart somewhere in my spirit. He and I were a lot alike. If you'd taken the mental illness out of it, if you'd taken the bipolar thing out of it, he and I he was just the same tree, you know? He was adventurous, he was fearless, he would try anything, he was reckless. I mean, seriously. And I was too. Exactly the same thing. Experimenting with everything, trying everything, you know, just seriously independent, wanting to be my own boss more than anything else. And he was the same way. And so when I see myself, when I see progress in myself in a funny way, when I see myself as a woman of my age now settling down into a more sort of steady mindset about things, it makes me think of him and how I would love to know him when he had started that process of kind of stop pushing against things and starting to settle into who he is, you know, and that I miss so deeply, and I wish so fervently that I could see that in him, because I know he would have gotten there. If I could get there, I know he would have gotten there. And so
probably would have done amazing things. And I think he is doing amazing things.
And he would have made a lot of mistakes, and he would have screwed up, and we would have had to bail him out of this and bail him out of that. And
but you would do that.
We perfectly well understood that. We knew that was part of the territory with him, you know, and that was okay.
So if you had one last thing, knowing that you are somebody in the ages we're becoming, over 23 years old, both of us.
Over 23, yes.
There's a lot of pain, and there's a lot of death that starts to happen around us. It is really hard for anybody to imagine their child taking their life or losing a child in any way. What's the one thing, if you could talk to a parent right now? Because what's the one thing, if you could talk to a parent right now, that is right there, right in that pain? They either lost somebody and they can't really see the light because it's just too soon. Have you found any words? Were there any words that anybody could have said to you back then? And what did you glean from going through that experience that you would share with somebody else?
I don't think there are any words that can be said. I think the only thing that you just have to hold on to people. You just have to be there for someone. You just have to. Our friends. We have friends, the Robinsons, who are our
same last name,
dearest friends. Yes, and they showed up. After he passed, they showed up every single day, must be for months. And if they couldn't show up, if they were traveling or something, we would get a picture a day. They were so just fiercely with us and unwilling to let go.
You didn't feel alone.
That we did not feel alone. We always knew that they were going to be there. We always knew, and they weren't the only ones. So I'm pointing them out because they were really particularly consistent.
Right.
You know, but we had.
I saw the love.
We had other people that would show up, and so I really think that just being there. We have a friend who lost her son not so long ago, and we take walks together. Nature for us was huge. We walked and walked. We went canoeing, we went outside, we tried to look at the horizon and be aware of the beauty and the miraculous nature around us. And it puts things in some kind of perspective for you. It makes you realize that the world is a very, very big place. And there are so many things that come and go, and this is part of our experience here. And really, the people that you travel this path with are the ones that are going to help you get through.
Well, I'm happy that we got to travel on this path.
Like you.
Well, we would touch if it was not a pandemic. We're going to have to end this with a pandemic hug. We've stayed our 6 feet apart. But
Absolutely,
absolutely. I have always felt close to you as a human being, even though we can't hug.
Well, let me tell you, I need to say that I am, and we are, so grateful to you and to Kim and to A Place to Be and all of your wonderful, wonderful people over there for how you helped us through, because this gave us, Will to Survive gave us a mission, something to work towards, that we were doing something about the pain, and that really, really does help. So many people that I've talked to, it's not what somebody can say to you, but if you get out and you can help other people, that helps you.
Yeah.
I know that for a fact. If you can feel like you're being meaningfully helpful, you know?
Yeah, well, you are welcome.
Thank
and
you.
I feel completely blessed, and I can speak on behalf of A Place to Be, honored that you would trust us with your child's life. So if anybody would like to see our documentary,
Yep.
it's called Just Like Will, and you can find Just Like Will on tomsweitzer.com, and we would love for you to view it. And it really is the story about A Will to Survive, the musical, and the power of healing. I want to thank the Walsh Family Tasting Room, where we are at today. It's a beautiful winter day for us to be here, and I hope that you enjoyed meeting Anne Charlotte, and that you can take this message back home into your own heart. This is a time you might not be somebody who experienced a suicide. I hope for you that you have not, or everybody has experienced some sort of death around them. But what Anne Charlotte is representing today for myself and I hope for you, is that when there is pain, there is something you can do, and that is reaching out. And don't ever be afraid to reach out. There is always somebody out there that loves you. Thank you.
There's a thread that binds us to each other, a thin thread that pulls me close to you. William's friends showed up in force right after it happened, and they swarmed the house, and they were all over the place. And I didn't realize what they were doing at first, but they were coming up here to his room and writing all over this wall. And then this window is the window that he would come in and out of all the time. He loved sitting out on the roof by himself or with his friends.
So we took his journal, and I personally took over 15 years of talking and listening and caring for teens, and that's where the lyrics came from.
Bang! Suddenly these kids are all over the stage and they're singing their hearts out, and it really brings home that sense of the energy that it takes to have a will to survive, the determination that is behind that. We have to find that determination within ourselves.